CWPA Remote Professional Edition, where we take a look at water polo players and where they are today.
This woman was a member of the Seattle University Redhawks women's water polo club team. After graduating in 2012 with a degree in business administration, finance, and accounting, she began a 7-year stint with a major accounting firm. And now she is the customer success manager for an audit software company. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Natalie Whitmore. Natalie, thanks so much for appearing on CWPA Remote.
Sure, thank you for having me.
So let's get right into it. How and why did you end up choosing Seattle University?
Oh, that's a good question. So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. Actually have several other water polo playing individuals in my life. So I chose Seattle University. I definitely knew I wanted to stay West Coast. Knew that I wanted to go to a big city where I didn't need a car. They had an excellent business school and they gave me money. So it, it all kind of came together. And they did advertise, at least at the time, that they had a Club Water Polo team on their, kind of student rec page. Mm-hmm. So those were the kind of major decisions there.
And do you remember your first practice?
Yes. So it's actually was not until 2 years after that a team finally came together after my being there. Keeping in mind, this was 2007, so social media was not as robust as it is now, I guess we'll say. So the finding out what the options were for playing water polo up here were, pretty limited. The team didn't really exist anymore by the time that I started. And the site just wasn't up to date, regarding whether or not there was a team. So my freshman year, I met a gal who was looking to put together a team. And I think she kind of, knew some other people who were from, where she grew up that was part of a high school league. And 2 years later, we finally had our first practice. It was all co-ed at the time. So, just to make sure we had enough people. We were all sitting there on the bleachers, just a ton of people, all, really excited to come and start playing, and all different skill levels. And it was pretty cool to, been a part of this team kind of getting started again. And, as anybody who's probably played club water polo knows, that the, 40 people that we started out with on that first practice dwindled down pretty quickly to, just our key players that we were able to scrap together to go to tournaments with. So.
And do you remember your first game?
So like I mentioned, that first year we were co-ed just to, have enough players to be able to play in tournaments. And where was that? So Central Washington University had the good pool, which would be surprising because there were, between Seattle U and UW that we didn't have great pool resources to host tournaments. So we always had to go out to Ellensburg in Central Washington in order to attend tournaments there. I can't say that I remember anything specific about that first game except for where it was and who was there. I can't remember if at the time we were playing without a coach still. I think we did have a coach by that time, somebody from the local Masters team. And I remember at one of those tournaments in the first year getting a tear in my bicep tendon, and then ending up in the hospital. And I can't remember if that was the first game or one later in the season, but it was so memorable. I can't remember which one, but that was one of those early ones for sure.
Not a great introduction into your college career.
No, I wouldn't.
How about your first goal?
I was always the master of the lob shot. So if I remember my first goal, it was probably, one of those cheap ones.
And any single best or two or three best memories of your college water polo career?
Yeah, there were a couple. I think I started playing goalie so I played for 3 years. So my junior, senior, and super senior year. And my senior year, our goalie kind of got hurt at like one of our last games of the last tournament of the season, and she had to get pulled out. And I was like, I played a little bit back when I was younger. I'll step up. And I think I remembered how much I liked playing goalie at that time because I didn't have to swim as much.
Right.
So and then played goalie the whole following year. So that was a good one. I think there's another one that I had given some thought to just around back in my senior year. We were at our league championship games to kind of see who would go on to the national tournaments. And, in our league, that was always University of Oregon, the real skilled team in the region. And like all other U of O sports, even club sports, they have got the Nike money and all the gear and all the skill and we were the whole tournament was watching the U of O and OSU game, and OSU was finally going to take U of O that game, and it was just amazing the way that the whole tournament came to watch this like underdog moment of, is this the year that OSU is finally going to take over U of O? And it didn't happen, but it was it's one of those things that I just still remember about how funny it was that everybody wanted this underdog to come in and topple the reigning champion.
Yeah. And any disappointments along the way with the water polo career at college?
No, not that I would, think back of and say now. I think that, like any other kind of struggling club team who, is constantly, fighting for pool time and, to have enough people who show up to practice in order to even make it worth it to get in the pool. No, wouldn't say there were any regrets for the, the time that I spent and the people that I met along the way.
Oh, that's great. How about in general, your reflections of your college water polo career, including any unusual or amusing stories that happened?
Yeah, no, I think, I kind of, mentioned the one about the different tournaments, but yeah, I mean, it was, like I kind of have been touching on just, the struggle to get people to show up to practice and finding enough people to, get us into a tournament. I think there was one year where we were, essentially playing every game where everyone was in the pool the whole time. And if we got one extra person to show up to the tournament to give us breaks, it was magical. And, and I remember at one point we did find, recruited a girl who just, just really wasn't a very strong swimmer. And so we were all kind of like, oh, is she going to be able to play and whatnot? And she came through. And and I think just having kind of been involved with different, club teams and, struggling with finding enough people to play that, for somebody who is coming from just a very like starter zero skill level to, come in and fill out a team. Otherwise they wouldn't have one. That's still something that I remember as being a real high point in playing in college.
Well, let's shift over into your working career. And before we get into your current endeavor, tell us about how you got started in the accounting field.
Sure. So I mentioned I chose Seattle U based on the fact that I had business school. I really didn't have any particular field in mind when I chose that. But pretty quickly ended up taking accounting as my major. And then, finance was the one that I chose first. I knew some people who were in the Seattle U Investment Club, which got me, very interested in investment finance, and got me involved, like I said, in the club, into the endowment fund club that was also kind of happening at the time. And everybody, I would go to these clubs and I would have these guest speakers and people would always ask, like, what's the advice that you would give your younger college self? And people from finance would always say, take more accounting classes. So I added that as a second major, even though I didn't find accounting to be the most riveting of subject matter. But through that, I also joined, the accounting clubs and which is how I, kind of got to know about the world of public accounting, which is where I, essentially recruited to straight out of college.
All right. Well, what were some of the positions that you held during your 7 years at Deloitte?
Sure. So I was from Deloitte and Touche's risk advisory practice. So what I focused on there was IT auditing, mostly for a particular type of governance and information security controls. So it was all client-based. So essentially what, the job was to go out to different clients, test their security controls and write reports about whether or not they, were doing what they were supposed to and doing what they said they were doing. And that way they could give that report from us to their customers. So I was there, like I said, for 7 years. I did focus mainly on IT controls for, most of that. I, did some other client work here and there, but the structure of public accounting is very much you come in at an entry level and you work your way up through a senior role where you're kind of overseeing the newer staff, and then eventually to a manager role where you're managing all the projects and all the teams running beneath you.
All right. And so why the move to Shujinko? Is that how you pronounce it?
That is, and which I know I had to confirm several times when I when I took the job. So I got connected with Shujinko through a friend of mine from Seattle U who worked at one of the VCs that was funding them. And I was still at Deloitte at the time, very happy with my career there, wasn't really necessarily looking to make a move. And my friend said, hey, there's this company that, my company's helping get started that are doing something with audits and IT and software. Like, do you want to go meet with them? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So we went and got a beer with the founders, and the CEO also had a similar kind of somewhat similar background to mine as far as he came from another Big Four auditing background. And, I left that meeting, we were kind of spitballing about what, the product could kind of look like and just, what the problem was in the marketplace that needed, a software solution like they were, still kind of coming up with at the time. And when I left that meeting, I was like, you know what, they're going to need an audit and I could bring them in as a customer to Deloitte. So kind of thinking that there was an opportunity for my current role to like bring them in as a customer. But I just kind of periodically, went and met up with them every once in a while just to like see how things were going and, how the product was progressing. And then just one day I got the call saying, hey, we want to hire you. So it was a really kind of cool experience to kind of see them getting started and to just, have some input, but also to get brought in and then, be a part of actually advising on the building of what the product needs.
So can you give our viewers a little look at exactly what the company does?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So essentially what our product Audit X is, which is our, main product, Shujinko being the company, is that we help customers get ready for getting audited. So of course, my background being the auditor, got to help provide the insight into, what is it that customers need to know before an auditor comes and starts, poking at you to figure out where all your problems are. So what we're really trying to build was how do we educate customers as to what they need and how do we let them, prepare before the auditor comes and, starts asking you questions. Second to that, there's also just the automation piece. With the proliferation of cloud products and cloud infrastructure, what type of evidence auditors are requesting is changing, how much they're requesting is changing, who needs to go get information to provide to auditors is changing a little bit too. Now it takes a lot more time for engineers as opposed to maybe just like a compliance or, an internal audit person. So another part of what we do is really helping build mostly APIs to help pull information, relevant information from your existing software into ours so that an auditor can take a look at it and say, okay, yeah, you're good, and that you can review it before you share it. So that's really the problem that we're trying to solve. We're definitely a competitive marketplace, but I think that we have the right people and the right, ideas to keep us moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So what does a typical work week for Natalie Whitmore look like?
Well, that's a twofold question: pre-COVID, post-COVID.
Okay, well, that would have led into my next question anyway, so wrap them both up.
Sure. So I'll have to say, I mean, so moving from, a consulting role that I was in before I joined Shujinko, I mean, I was very all over the place. Maybe working out of the Deloitte office downtown, but oftentimes moving around to my different customers. It was very rare if I got, a day where I felt comfortable like working from home that I wasn't missing out on something more important at a different location. So one of the reasons also that I made the move was the flexibility to get to have my own desk somewhere. And so Shujinko actually had it set up that we were all working from home twice a week before. So we were very well, equipped to, once the stay-at-home order set in here in Seattle in March, that we were all like, okay, everybody just back to your home office.
Mm-hmm.
The downside though is that we had just, kind of reached that point in the company's growth where we had a nice office. So we moved into that office in December, January, only to have everybody go back home in March. So the office is still there. If somebody really needs to go in, they still can. But yeah, so now it's all pretty much remote. So I am in kind of a one-person team right now. I run our customer success. So I'm the person who really works with our customers to get them onboarded into the product and really help them all the way through the audit process. But I work pretty closely with our engineers to, ensure that our product is working well, and that if our customers need more, technical advice than what I can offer, that they'll, assist as well. I also work closely with sales and marketing and also do a lot of our internal compliance work. So I also make sure that our product is ready using our product, of course, to go get audited. So my days generally, a lot of Zoom calls, which, I was doing a lot of Zoom calls before. We actually don't have a lot of customers who are here in Seattle. So, that's the software world. Everybody, is remote anyways in some capacity. But so pre-COVID, I mean, we all kind of worked out of the office and, have our keg in the back that, at 5 o'clock, whoever didn't have anything else to do that night would go sit and have a beer and hang out. And startup life definitely does have its perks when it when it comes to that. It's a small company. You're 24, 3-ish people. I have to check on that. So it is a cool experience of even people that maybe I don't directly interact with through my day-to-day responsibilities, that I still sit and have lunch with, or have a beer with at the end of the day. Obviously COVID has changed that a little bit. My company's done a really good job of trying to do like interactive, like social things. Like, so, 4 p.m. on a Thursday, we would play, or we had trivia nights and things like that for a little while. And we've done some cooking classes, and yeah, it's like the leadership has certainly made, solid attempts to ensure that, we still feel like a community despite, being everyone at home.
Right. Well, it sounds like an excellent environment. So where does Natalie go from here?
We'll see. I mean, it's a very hard time to try to see where you're going to be in 5 years. I hope it's still a Shujinko. I mean, that's always the little bit of the risk you take when you go join a startup. So ideally, that would be my 5-10 year plan. I mean, I think as we grow and get more customers, I mean, building out a customer success practice of, more individuals who are, dedicated to customer success and customer support, that'll be a great experience both for myself, but also just to, keep the company moving and making sure our customers are happy. And, your customers are kind of key when you're trying to stay in business. So
For sure.
that's an important part.
Sure.
I still very much enjoy the kind of ensuring that our internal compliance and security measures are in place. So that's a role that I would like to, retain. It allows me to work very closely with our engineering and just, also with the product people. And so that's a roles that I would like to keep. Again, as the company grows, of course, those will need to be fine tuned a little bit. But that's the plan, unless we take another economic or hard to say what the what the next couple of years are going to look like. But that's what I would ideally like to be doing, is more of what I'm doing now.
Well, so we have talked about your college water polo career a bit, and we've talked a bit about your business career. I think our viewers would be interested in knowing how you feel that your college water polo experience has affected or impacted your working career.
Mm-hmm, sure. I think the most direct impact was I mentioned that I started my career out in public accounting, and the recruiting process around that is essentially all the students go and interview at a bunch of firms, and you just you do a lot of interviews. You do multiple for each company, and you kind of cast a wide net, and everyone always asked me about water polo. I kind of mentioned that I was part of a bunch of finance and accounting clubs and projects and classes, and I had internships and all these things, and I always, without fail, was asked about water polo. So I think that was just the talking point, I guess, that it became in just showing that you're a well-rounded person and have interests beyond, just the job, and your ability to perform it. Is that people want to know not just what you can do, but who you are, and that having, something that's more than just, finance and accounting on my resume really kind of gave me something to talk about and connect with people. And particularly, and I'll be honest, I'm not a big consumer of sports. I still, of course, watch water polo, and, I enjoy the kind of more one-off, like the rugbies and the lacrosses and stuff, if they ever kind of come my purview. But I'm not a big consumer of football or basketball and professional sports. And, in a city like Seattle, where most people are just diehard Seahawks fans, that even if I'm kind of not great with those conversations, that you still kind of have this connection of oh yeah, I played a sport in college, and that it really kind of shows your, like I said, more than just what's on your resume. So that's a little bit more the direct, one of the early pieces in my career. I do think that some of the managerial skills that I've learned have maybe rooted, directly from some of my experiences playing. I think, just learning to deal with people is such a life skill and such a professional skill in a lot of ways. Like I mentioned a lot about, the team not always having enough people to play, and you're kind of in a constant state of recruiting more people so that you have enough to play in a tournament, and, training people, taking the time out of your practice to work on somebody else's skills is such an invaluable skill to have as a manager, right? Is that when you're moving up in your career, you're always going to have so many things that you need to do. But yet, if you don't take the time to teach somebody else how to do them, you're only ever going to be doing them yourself. So the structure at Deloitte was very much like that, is that you only moved up if you were managing teams. And that's very much a skill that's true for, lots of professional, routes, is that you can't do everything on your own, which I think, if anybody who's ever played water polo, you can't be the only person driving the ball down and shooting every time, is that, you have to have a team. And I think there's a lot of flexibility that you have to have when you play water polo. You can't just sit at your spot in the umbrella. You have to move. Otherwise, the game stands still. And I think that's very true for a lot of professional skills. Making sure that you're continually, changing and adapting to different playing styles. You can't just sit and do what you're comfortable with all the time.
Well, have you ever found yourself in a situation where in your work environment where you stopped and you said to yourself, I can draw from that, whatever that is, from my college water polo experience, and then deal with the situation? Has that ever occurred?
I mean, it's hard to say if I thought that at the time. But I do have a, example of that. And, I mentioned about how you just kind of need to be flexible, and my playing style is very, I'm going to keep you at an arm's length. I was never a kind of constant wrestling, grabbing people type player. And that usually worked until, you're man-on-man defense with somebody who does play like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like there have been definitely specific instances in my career where, the way I was doing things was working, and either, a colleague or a customer or client, that sometimes you just have to adapt to what they want to do. And I think there's at least one specific instance where, like my past career in public accounting, it's very structured as far as how the teams are. And, your senior kind of looks out for your consultants, and your manager manages the seniors, right? So what happens when you have two managers who are working together? Who's in charge? Who makes those types of calls? And I think that when you get stuck in, this is how I do things, and I've been successful in the past with this, that you'll butt heads, that you'll, that you're going to position yourself against the people that you're working with if you get stuck in your way of doing things. And I think that, I've been in those situations before where at work where I need to kind of be like, for the sake of the success of this project, I need to, pull my ego back and, work and find a mutual way of doing these things. And I think that connects pretty directly to, to playing water polo, where I want to keep an arm's length between me and you. And if you get away from me, I'll catch up with you, and instead just be like, what, if you want to grab suits, we're grabbing suits, in order to get this ball down to the other side of the pool. So.
Well, a lot of interviewers, they will ask the question this way, the one I'm about to ask, that what would you tell your younger self as far as advice goes? But I like to approach it from the exact opposite way. I'd like to hear, what would college Natalie Whitmore, the water polo player, tell Natalie Whitmore, the Shujinko, client success person?
That's a good one. It's just like part of my last job was to do recruiting for students from college to come work at Deloitte. So I have so many, like, what advice would you give to college kids? My gosh. Just to not get lazy and not get complacent. I think that, again, with COVID and not being able to go out and do things, I think it's a little difficult to say this in this time, but is don't, remember that, you want to go travel, and you want to go see music, and you want to go do things. And it's so easy to just sit at home on the couch and watch Netflix, and to use sometimes your job and your career as an excuse to not go do things. So I think if college Natalie could tell current Natalie what's a one piece of advice, it would be to get off the couch and and go do, fun things for yourself, and don't let I need to be up for an 8 a.m. meeting stop you from doing something on a weekday if it's really important to you.
Well, it's good advice. I'm sure lots of people hopefully will follow it. Finally, we do have high school players and their parents watching who are looking and considering college. And we have college players who are now thinking about career post-graduation. What advice would you give to these people about college water polo and the overall situation as it relates to future career?
Sure. And I'll, speak towards the club experience as well. I guess to both high school and college students, it's probably relevant advice, but the best way to be get a leadership position, or the president of a club, is to start a club. So if going to a school that doesn't have a really good established one, to not be afraid to go to a school where there's an opportunity to start a club if they don't already have one. I think to students who are making a decision on where to go to college based on whether or not they already have one, that's a great decision. I think that another professional piece that I haven't really brought up yet is just networking. It's not just what you know, it's who you know, unfortunately, in a lot of, scenarios, and that being, finding channels in which to meet people in an authentic manner is really critical. So if you love water polo, like go meet other people who love it, and you never know what else they're going to love that you might get connected to. And if it's, you meet somebody on the polo team who, is interested in a certain field that they're studying that maybe they introduce you to, that's a really great way. You don't have to just meet the people in your dorms or the people in, your 101 classes. Is that, if you look for the opportunities to meet people through other means, you'll expand your horizons quite a bit.
Well, I hope they were taking notes, and because that's good advice to follow. She followed up her establishment or reestablishment of a club water polo program at her college to get into the accounting industry and help establish new audit software. Natalie Whitmore has been my guest today on CWPA Remote. Natalie, thanks so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and your insights into how college water polo can impact working careers.
This is great. Thank you so much for having me.
Until next time on CWPA Remote, this is George Gross Jr. wishing all of our viewers the very best in and out of the water.